The ship landed without warning on the royal platform. No horns sounded. No guards lined up in neat rows. No servants waited with warm drinks and fresh clothes. Queen had not told anyone she was coming home early. She stepped out of her vessel and stretched her massive wings. They spread wide, each one the length of 3 humans standing head to toe. Her scales shimmered dark purple in the pale light of the 2 moons. She was tired. The diplomatic mission to the system had lasted 40 days, and she had spent every single one of them arguing with stubborn politicians who cared more about trade routes than peace. The palace stood tall before her. It was built from black stone that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. Towers reached up toward the sky like claws. This was her home, the home of the royal family for 10,000 years. But tonight it felt empty. Walked through the main gate. The guards there jumped to their feet, shocked to see her. They bowed so low their horns nearly touched the ground. "My queen," one of them stammered. "We did not know you were returning tonight. We would have prepared." "I wanted no preparation," said. Her voice was low and smooth, like stones rolling in deep water. "Continue your watch. Tell no one I have arrived." The guards nodded quickly. They knew better than to question her. Moved through the palace halls. Her claws clicked softly against the stone floor. The sound echoed in the empty corridors. Most of the servants had gone to sleep. The advisors were in their quarters, probably dreaming of power and politics. No one was around to bother her. This was good. She needed quiet. For 40 days she had thought about her children, her triplets, 3 small dragons, barely 5 years old, born from the same egg in an event so rare it happened only once every 1,000 years. The priests had called it a blessing. The advisors had called it a miracle. But then they discovered the truth. All 3 children were deaf. In society, this was not just a problem. It was a shame, a curse. They communicated through sound, through roars and growls and complex patterns of noise that carried meaning across great distances. A deaf could not speak properly, could not hear commands, could not participate in the great hunts or the war councils or the ceremonies that bound their people together. The advisors had told to hide the children, keep them away from public eyes. Some had even suggested worse things, things that makes blood boil with rage. She had silenced those advisors permanently. But even she could not change what her people believed. So her children lived in a quiet wing of the palace, far from the courts and the politics. They had nurses and caretakers. They had toys and books. They had everything except what they needed most. Connection. Climbed the stairs toward the children's wing. Her hearts, both of them, beat faster as she got closer. She had missed them so much. Every night on that diplomatic ship she had thought about their faces, their small wings, their bright eyes that looked at the world with such curiosity, even though they could not hear its sounds. The hallway to their rooms was dark. This was strange. Usually, at least one light stayed on. The nurses knew the children did not like complete darkness. Slowed her steps. Her eyes adjusted quickly. Could see well in the dark, a gift from their ancestors who hunted in the night. She moved forward carefully, her claws making no sound now. Something felt wrong. She reached the door to the children's main room. It was slightly open. A thin line of moonlight spilled through the crack. Pushed the door wider and stepped inside. The room was empty. The beds were made. The toys were put away. Everything was neat and clean, but there were no children, no nurses, no one. Felt something cold crawl up her spine. Where were they? It was the middle of the night. They should be sleeping. They should be safe in their beds, dreaming whatever dreams young dragons dreamed. She moved quickly now, checking the other rooms. The bathroom, empty. The play area, empty. The study room where they practiced writing, empty. Her breathing grew faster. Her wings pressed tight against her back. Fear was not an emotion felt often. She had fought in 3 wars. She had killed enemies with her bare claws. She had stared down threats that would make lesser beings run and hide. But this was different. This was her children. She was about to roar, to wake the entire palace and demand answers, when she heard something. Not a sound exactly, more like a feeling, a vibration in the air. It came from somewhere outside. Moved to the window and looked down. The royal garden spread out below her, silver and blue under the moonlight. Ancient trees with white leaves stood in neat rows. A small pond reflected the sky like a mirror. And there, in the center of it all, sitting on the soft grass. She saw them. Her triplets, all three of them. Their small wings folded against their backs, their tails curled around their legs. They were not sleeping. They were not crying. They were looking at something. Someone. A figure sat with them, small, no wings, no scales, soft skin that looked pale in the moonlight, a human. His eyes narrowed. She recognized that creature. It was the Janitor, the human brought in 6 months ago from some backwater planet called Earth. He had been hired to clean the lower halls, to scrub floors and polish windows. Nothing important, nothing that should ever bring him near the royal children. Yet there he was, sitting in her garden with her children gathered around him. What was he doing? His first instinct was to fly down there and demand answers, to grab the human and shake him until he explained why he was anywhere near the heirs to the throne. But something stopped her. The children were not scared. They were not upset. In fact, as watched, one of them, her daughter, the smallest of the three, reached out and touched the human's hand. And the human did not pull away. Instead, he moved his hands in a strange way. His fingers formed shapes, patterns. He pointed at himself, then at the child, then at the sky. The triplet watched closely. Then she moved her own small claws, copying the shapes. Did not understand. What was this? What were they doing? She had to know more. Instead of flying down, she moved to a different window, one that was closer to the garden but hidden by shadow. She could see better from there. She could watch without being seen. The human was still moving his hands. The children were still watching, and for the first time in a very long time, saw something on her children's faces that she had almost forgotten. They were smiling. His name was, and he had never expected to end up on an alien planet surrounded by dragons. 6 months ago, he had been living in a small apartment on Earth, in a city called. He worked at a factory that made parts for spaceships. The pay was bad. The hours were long. And every night he came home to an empty room with nothing but a mattress on the floor and a picture of his grandmother on the wall. She had raised him after his parents died in an accident. She had taught him to be kind, to work hard, to never give up no matter how difficult things became. And when she passed away 3 years before, had felt like a piece of himself had gone with her. He had no family left, no real friends, just the factory and the empty apartment and the feeling that life was supposed to be more than this. Then the Galactic Employment Agency came to Earth. They were looking for workers, humans willing to travel to other planets and do jobs that aliens did not want to do, cleaning, maintenance, basic labor. The pay was good, they said, much better than anything on Earth, and workers would get to see the galaxy, to experience things that most humans could only dream about. Signed up the same day. They sent him to many places, a mining station near a dying star, a spaceport where ships from 100 different species came and went, a research facility floating in the clouds of a gas giant. He cleaned them all. He asked no questions. He did his work and kept his head down. And then he came here, to the palace of the Dragon Queen. They scared him at first. They were huge, 3 times his size, with wings and claws and teeth that could bite through metal. Their voices were like thunder, deep and powerful and impossible to ignore. And they looked at humans the way humans looked at insects, small, weak, and mostly unimportant. But had learned something important in his travels. Every species was different, but feelings were universal. Loneliness looked the same everywhere. Pain sounded the same in any language. And kindness, true kindness, could cross any barrier. He discovered the children by accident. One night, about 4 months ago, he had been cleaning a hallway that he was not supposed to be in. He had gotten lost. The palace was enormous, with thousands of rooms and corridors that all looked the same. He wandered for hours before he found a staircase that led somewhere unfamiliar. At the top of the stairs, he heard something strange. Not a sound exactly, but a feeling of movement. He followed it to a large door and peeked inside. 3 small dragons sat in a circle on the floor. They were playing some kind of game, but they were not making any noise. Their mouths moved, but no sounds came out. Their wings fluttered, but silently. It was like watching a video with the volume turned off. One of them looked up and saw him. Froze. He expected the child to scream, to call for guards, to do something that would get him in terrible trouble. But the child did not scream. Could not scream, he realized. Instead, the small dragon just stared at him with wide, curious eyes. The other 2 children noticed him then. They all looked at him the same way, not with fear but with wonder, like they had never seen anything quite like him before. A nurse rushed in moments later. She grabbed by the arm and dragged him out of the room, hissing warnings about staying away from places he did not belong. He apologized over and over. He promised it would never happen again. But he could not stop thinking about those children. He asked questions carefully, afraid of attracting too much attention. He listened to conversations when no one thought he was paying attention. And slowly, he pieced together the truth. The royal triplets were deaf. They had been born that way. And because of this, they were kept hidden from the world, raised in isolation by nurses who could not communicate with them properly. Understood what that felt like. After his grandmother died, he had spent years feeling invisible, feeling like no one could see him, no one could hear him, no one cared if he existed. The loneliness had nearly destroyed him. He could not let those children feel the same way. So he did something risky, something that could have gotten him fired or worse. He started visiting them. At first, it was just quick visits late at night, when the nurses were tired and careless. He would slip into the garden outside their window and wave at them. The children noticed him right away. They pressed their small faces against the glass and watched him with those big, curious eyes. Then got an idea. He went to the palace library. It was a massive place, filled with records and documents from thousands of years of history. Most of it was useless to him, written in languages he could not read, about events he did not understand. But he kept searching. And then he found it. An old book, covered in dust, sitting on a shelf that looked like no one had touched it in centuries. It was about communication systems used by the before they developed their current language, before they relied entirely on sound. The ancient had used hand signals. It was not a complete language, just basic signs for important things: food, water, danger, safety, family. The book said this system had been abandoned thousands of years ago, when the voice evolved and became the primary method of communication. But the signs were still there, written down, preserved. Spent weeks learning them. He practiced in his small room at night, moving his hands in front of a mirror. The shapes felt strange at first. His human fingers were not built the same way as claws, but he adapted. He found ways to make the signs work with his own body. And then he taught the children. The first time he showed them a sign, the sign for friend, the oldest child, a boy with dark green scales, stared at him in confusion. Repeated the sign. He pointed at himself. He pointed at the child. He made the sign again. And then slowly the child moved his own claws. The shape he understood. That was the moment everything changed. Over the next few months taught them more and more signs. They learned words for the sun and the moon, for happy and sad, for hungry and tired, for mother, even though their mother was far away and could not speak to them in any way they could understand. The children learned fast. faster than expected. They were hungry for connection, desperate for a way to express the thoughts and feelings that had been trapped inside them for so long. And tonight, like so many nights before, sat in the garden with them under the moonlight. He did not know that the queen had returned. He did not know that she was watching from a window above, her golden eyes fixed on him with an expression he could not have read even if he had seen it. He only knew that 3 small dragons were looking at him, like he was the most important person in the universe. The smallest one, a girl with scales the color of the night sky, tugged at his sleeve. She made a sign with her claws, a question she had asked him many times before. The sign for why. Why do you come here? Why do you teach us? Why do you care? Smiled at her. He made a sign back, a sign he had invented himself, combining the old symbols with something from Earth. The sign for because you matter. The little dragon's eyes went wide. She did not fully understand all the words yet, but she understood enough. She leaned forward and pressed her small head against his chest. And the janitor from Earth held the daughter of the Dragon Queen and let her feel his heartbeat, a rhythm she could not hear but could feel, a proof that he was real, that she was not alone. Above them, hidden in shadow, Queen watched it all. And for the first time in 5 years, she did not know what to do. Could not move. She stood at the window, her claws pressed against the cold stone, watching the scene below. Her eyes, sharp enough to count the stars, focused on every detail. The human's hands moved again. He made a shape, fingers spread wide, then brought together, then spread again. The children watched with complete attention. Their eyes never left his hands. Then the oldest child, her son, the movement. His claws were not shaped like human fingers. They were larger, sharper, designed for tearing and climbing. But somehow he managed to form the same shape, close enough that the meaning carried through. Smiled and nodded. He made another sign. This one was different, both hands moving in circles around each other like moons orbiting a planet. The middle child, her daughter, tried it next. She got it wrong the first time. Her circles went the wrong direction, but she did not give up. She tried again, and again, until finally the movement was correct. Reached out and patted her head gently. Wings fluttered with happiness. Felt something strange in her chest. It took her a moment to recognize it. Pride. She felt proud of her daughter, proud of a small victory that she had not been part of, that she had not even known about until this moment. How many victories had she missed? The question hit her like a blow. She had been away for 40 days on this trip, but it was not just this trip. There had been others before it, dozens of them. Meetings and negotiations and ceremonies that demanded her presence, that took her away from the palace for weeks at a time. She had told herself it was necessary. She was the queen, her people needed her, the empire needed her, and her children were safe, had nurses, caretakers, everything they could want. Everything except her. And apparently, everything except this human. Watched as taught them a new sign. This one involved touching the chest, right where the heart would be, then pointing outward. The children practiced it eagerly. Even the smallest little managed to do it after several tries. What did it mean? Did not know. She had never seen these signs before. She had never even known they existed. The ancient texts. She remembered now. There were stories about the old ways before the language became what it was today. Stories about a time when her people communicated through movement as much as sound. But those were just stories. History so old it had become legend. This human had dug through that history. He had found something buried and forgotten, and he had used it to reach her children. Why? That was the question that burned in his mind. Why would a janitor, a lowly worker from a primitive planet, spend his time learning ancient symbols? He gained nothing from it. The children could not pay him. They could not advance his position. They could not offer him any reward that mattered. So why? Below in the garden stood up. The children looked disappointed. Their small faces fell. but made another sign, one that clearly meant "I will return," and their expressions brightened. He walked toward the garden gate, moving quietly. The children watched him go. They did not try to follow. They had learned the rules of their secret friendship. Stay hidden, stay quiet, let no one know. Realized with a start that her children were keeping secrets from the palace staff, from the nurses, from everyone. They had learned to be clever, to protect something precious, something they did not want taken away. The thought made her heart ache. She moved away from the window and began walking down to the garden. She did not know what she would say. She did not know what she would do, but she needed to see them up close. She needed to understand. The path to the garden was long, moved slowly, giving herself time to think. By the time she reached the outer doors, she had made a decision. She would not reveal herself. Not yet. She would watch. She would learn. She would try to understand what was happening before she acted. The garden was cool and quiet. The white-leafed trees swayed gently in the night breeze, moved between them like a shadow, her dark scales blending with the darkness. She was large, but she knew how to be silent. Years of hunting had taught her that. She found a spot behind a thick tree trunk, close enough to see the children but far enough to remain hidden. They were still sitting on the grass, practicing their signs. They moved their claws through the air, forming shapes and symbols, talking to each other in a language that made no sound. Watched her oldest son make a sign. Then her daughters responded. An entire conversation happening right in front of her, and she could not understand a single word. Her children were speaking, really speaking, and she could not hear them. The irony was not lost on her. For years she had grieved because her children could not participate in communication. They could not hear. They could not speak properly. They were cut off from their people, from their culture, from everything that made a who they were. But they were not cut off. They had found a way, or rather someone had found a way for them. Made a complicated sign. It involved both hands moving in different patterns, then coming together. Whatever he said, it made his sisters laugh, or what passed for laughter among the deaf. Their bodies shook. Their wings fluttered. Their mouths opened in silent joy. Had not seen them laugh like that in years. She remembered the last time. It was before they understood that they were different, before the nurses started treating them with pity, before the advisors started calling them broken. They had been so young then, so innocent. They laughed at everything, at the birds flying past the window, at the funny faces made for them, at the simple joy of being alive. Then they grew older. They started to notice. They saw how people looked at them. They heard, or rather felt, the silence that followed them wherever they went. They learned that they were not like other, that something was wrong with them. The laughter stopped. But here it was again, in a moonlit garden, brought back by a human with strange hands and a kind smile. Felt tears forming in her eyes. This was not normal for her. Queens did not cry. Warriors did not cry. But she was also a mother, and mothers carried pain that no title could shield them from. She watched for another hour. She watched her children practice their signs. She watched them play silent games. She watched them lean against each other, comfortable and happy, like they belonged in this world after all. Finally, the night grew late. The children yawned, silently, always silently, and headed back toward their rooms. They moved carefully, checking corners before they turned them, making sure no one saw them returning from the garden. They had done this many times before. That much was clear. Stayed hidden until they were gone. Then she stepped out from behind the tree and stood in the spot where they had been sitting. The grass was still pressed down from their weight. She looked up at the palace. Somewhere inside, her children were going to sleep. And somewhere else, a human janitor was probably doing the same, never knowing how close he had come to being discovered. Made a decision. Tomorrow, she would find out everything about this human named, where he came from, why he was here. What kind of person would spend months teaching dead symbols to children who were not his own? and then she would decide what to do with him. But as she walked back to her chambers, a small voice in her head whispered something she did not expect. Maybe it said you should not decide anything. Maybe you should learn. For the first time in a very long time, Queen listened to that voice. The next day did not announce her return. She stayed in her private chambers and sent for the head of palace records. An old named arrived within the hour, carrying stacks of documents and looking nervous. "My queen," he said, bowing low, "I did not know you had returned. How may I serve you?" "I want information about the human workers in the palace," said. She kept her voice calm. "Specifically the one assigned to cleaning duties, the one called." His eyes flickered with surprise. "The human janitor. Has he done something wrong, Your Majesty? I can have him removed immediately if—" "I asked for information, not assumptions." The old swallowed hard. "Of course, forgive me." He shuffled through his documents with shaking claws. "Human male, arrived 6 months ago through the Galactic Employment Agency, assigned to maintenance work in the lower halls. His performance reviews are adequate. He shows up on time, he does his work. He asks no questions and causes no problems." "Where did he come from?" "Earth, a small planet in the outer systems. Mostly water from what I understand. The humans there are primitive compared to most spacefaring species. They only achieved interstellar travel a few decades ago." Had heard of Earth before. It was not an important planet. Humans were seen as useful for manual labor, but nothing more. They were small, weak, short-lived creatures with no special abilities worth mentioning. And yet one of them had done what her entire empire could not. He had reached her children. "What else do you know about him?" she asked. "Looked through more papers. Not much, Your Majesty. He has no family, no criminal record, no notable history. He is ordinary, just another worker." Ordinary. The word echoed in his mind. There was nothing ordinary about what she had seen last night. "That will be all," she said. "Leave the documents and go. Tell no one that I am here." Bowed again and left quickly, clearly relieved to be dismissed. Spent the rest of the day reading through every piece of information she could find about. There was not much. Employment records, health checks, basic background information. Nothing that explained why he would spend his nights teaching ancient hand signals to deaf dragon children. As evening approached, she made another decision. She would watch again tonight. She would see more. And maybe, if she was patient, she would understand. The night came slowly, waited in her chambers until the palace grew quiet. Then she made her way back to the garden, using a different path this time. She found a new hiding spot, closer than before, behind a wall of flowering bushes that gave off a sweet smell. She did not wait long. Appeared first. He walked quietly through the garden gate, carrying something in his hands. It looked like a bag of some kind. He sat down in the usual spot and waited. Minutes later, the children came. They ran or tried to run quietly, which made their movements awkward and funny, across the grass and surrounded him. The smallest one threw her arms around his neck. He hugged her back gently. Then he opened the bag. Inside were objects did not recognize at first. Small, colorful things. Took them out one by one and held them up for the children to see. A red one, a blue one, a yellow one. He made a sign while holding the red object. The children repeated the sign. Then he did the same with the blue and yellow ones. He was teaching them colors, giving them words for things they could see but never talk about before. The session continued. Pulled out more objects, a small ball, a fake flower, a smooth stone. Each one came with a new sign. The children absorbed everything like sponges soaking up water. They practiced each sign until they got it right, then moved on to the next. But it was not just teaching, there was also play. At one point, picked up the small ball and threw it gently too. The boy caught it with his claws and threw it back. Then wanted a turn. Soon they were all playing, tossing the ball back and forth. their silent laughter filling the garden with joy that made no sound. Watched from her hiding spot, she saw how patient the human was, how gentle. He never got frustrated when the children made mistakes. He never raised his voice, not that they could hear it anyway. He just smiled and showed them again as many times as they needed. This was not the behavior of someone trying to gain something. This was not a scheme or a plan. This was simply kindness, pure, genuine kindness from a creature who had no reason to give it. Thought about her advisors. She thought about the priests and the nobles and all the important people who had told her over and over that her children were broken, that they would never be normal, that they should be hidden away, kept out of sight, so they would not embarrass the royal family. None of those important people had ever sat in the dirt and taught her children colors. None of them had ever tried to learn how to communicate with them. None of them had ever treated them like they mattered. But this human did. A memory came to her then, something from long ago, from before she was queen. She had been young, barely more than a child herself, and she had gotten lost in the palace during a storm. The thunder had scared her. The lightning had made the shadows jump and twist. She had curled up in a corner, too afraid to move. A servant had found her, an old female who worked in the kitchens. Instead of calling for help, the servant had simply sat down beside her. She had wrapped her wings around the frightened princess and held her until the storm passed. She had not said a word. She had just been there. That moment of simple kindness had stayed with her entire life. Now she was watching someone else give that same gift to her children. The playing stopped, put the toys back in the bag, but before he left, he did something new. He touched his chest, then pointed at. He made a sign that did not recognize, hands moving in a pattern that ended with his palms pressed together. The children's eyes went wide, started bouncing up and down, grabbed her brother's arm. Even, usually the of the three, looked excited. Made the sign again. The children it together, their claws moving in perfect unison. Did not know what the sign meant, but she could see its effect. Whatever he had said, whatever he had taught them, it meant something important. Stood up to leave. The children hugged him one last time. Then he walked toward the garden gate the same way he had come. But this time moved. She stepped out from behind the bushes. She blocked his path. She stood there in the moonlight, a dragon queen in full view, looking down at the small human who had been sneaking into her garden for months. Froze. His face went pale, his eyes went wide, his whole body started to shake. Saw real fear there, not the careful, controlled fear that advisors showed when they worried about losing their positions. This was the fear of a small creature facing something massive and powerful and deadly. She could have said anything. She could have demanded answers. She could have called for guards. She could have ended everything right there. Instead, she said something she had not planned. "Teach me." Blinked, the fear in his eyes was joined by confusion. What? His voice was softer than she expected. "The signs, the words, the language you have given my children, teach me how to speak to them." For a long moment, nothing happened. The garden was silent. The moons hung overhead like watchful eyes. Then slowly nodded. "Okay," he said. His voice was barely a whisper. "Okay, I can do that." And behind them, hidden in the shadows by the garden entrance, 3 small dragons watched their mother speak to their secret friend. For the first time, they did not feel afraid. The next few weeks changed everything. Told no one about what she had discovered. Not the advisors, not the nurses, not even her closest guards. This was between her and her children, a small, quiet revolution happening in the moonlit garden. Every night after the palace fell asleep would meet in the garden. Sometimes the children were there. Sometimes they were not. Either way, the lessons continued. Was nervous at first. His hands shook when he showed her the signs. His voice trembled when he explained what each one meant. He kept glancing at her like He expected her to suddenly change her mind, to roar and swipe at him with her claws, to do all the terrible things that a dragon queen was supposed to do. But was patient, she watched, she listened, she practiced. Learning was harder than she expected. Her claws were not made for the delicate movements that fingers could do. Some signs required her to twist her hands in ways that felt unnatural. Others needed her to move slowly when her instinct was to be fast and powerful. But she kept trying. Night after night, she sat in the grass like a student and let a human janitor correct her mistakes. She repeated signs until her claws ached. She asked questions until her throat was dry. She pushed herself harder than she had pushed herself for anything in years. Because this mattered. This mattered more than treaties or wars or the endless politics of ruling an empire. This was about her children. This was about finally, truly connecting with them. The first time she used a sign correctly in front of the children, cried. They were in the garden together, all 5 of them for the first time, had finished learning the basics. She knew how to say hello, how to say goodbye, how to say I love you in the silent language that had rebuilt from ancient dust. She looked at her youngest daughter and made the sign, hands pressed to her chest, then opened outward like releasing something precious into the world. Stared at her, her small eyes filled with tears. Then she launched herself at, wrapping her tiny arms around her mother's leg, pressing her face against the scales she had always touched but never truly felt before. And joined moments later. All 3 children clung to their mother, their bodies shaking with emotions they had kept buried for years. And Queen of the ruler of 1,000 worlds sat down in the dirt and held them all. She cried too. She was not ashamed of it. Watched from a distance. He had moved away to give them privacy, standing near the garden gate with his head bowed. He looked smaller than ever in that moment, a tiny human in a garden full of dragons, surrounded by something he had helped create but could never truly be part of. Looked up and saw him. She called. He lifted his head. His eyes were wet too. She extended her wing. It was a gesture of invitation, of welcome, something only did for family. Come, she said, you belong here. Hesitated. He looked at the children. He looked at the queen. He looked at the wings stretched out toward him, an offer of belonging from a creature who had every reason to treat him like dirt beneath her claws. Then he walked forward. He sat down beside them, and without hesitation grabbed his hand and pulled him closer. They stayed there until dawn. Word spread eventually. It always does. The advisors were furious. A human, teaching the royal children, meeting privately with the queen, it was scandalous, unacceptable, against every tradition that held society together. They demanded that be removed. Some demanded worse. They stood in the great hall, their voices loud and angry, their wings flared with righteous outrage. Let them talk. She sat on her throne and watched them argue for nearly an hour. She did not interrupt. She did not respond. She simply waited. When they finally ran out of words, she stood up. The hall went silent. You call my children broken, she said. Her voice was calm, but it carried to every corner of the massive room. You said they could never communicate. You said they should be hidden away, forgotten, treated like a shameful secret. The advisors shifted uncomfortably. No one met her eyes. A human janitor proved you all wrong, stepped down from her throne. A small, weak creature from a primitive world looked at my children and saw what none of you could see. He saw potential. He saw worth. He saw 3 young who deserved to be heard, even if they could not hear. She walked between the rows of advisors. They parted before her like water before a ship. He taught them a language that you let die. He gave them voices when you told me they had none. He did in 6 months what this entire empire failed to do in 5 years. She stopped in front of the advisor who had spoken loudest, a large with gold-tipped horns and cold eyes. Tell me, said softly, what have you done that matters half as much? The advisor opened his mouth. No words came out. That is what I thought. Turned and walked back to her throne. She sat down and looked out at the assembled nobles and officials, the most powerful in the empire. Will not be removed, she said. He will be given a new position. He will be the official teacher of my children. He will have quarters near the royal wing. He will have access to any resources he needs. And anyone who questions this decision will answer to me personally. She let the words hang in the air. Am I clear? No one argued. Later that night, found in the garden, he was sitting in their usual spot, looking up at the stars. The children had already gone to bed, tired from a long day of lessons and play. You did not have to do that, said quietly. The announcement, the new position, I was happy just being the janitor. Sat down beside him, the grass bent beneath her weight. I know, she said, but you deserve more. My children deserve more. And my people need to learn that kindness matters, that small actions from small creatures can change everything. Was quiet for a moment. Then he asked the question that had been on his mind for weeks. Why do you think I did it? Why do you think I spent all that time learning the signs, teaching the children? Considered the question. She had asked herself the same thing many times. Because you understand loneliness, she said finally. Because you know what it feels like to be invisible, and because you are human, and humans, I am learning, have a strange gift for seeing value where others see nothing. Smiled, it was a sad smile, but also a grateful one. My grandmother used to say something, he said. She said that the measure of a person is not what they do for those who can repay them. It is what they do for those who cannot. Thought about that. She thought about all the times she had made decisions based on politics, on power, on what she could gain. Your grandmother was wise. She was, I miss her. They sat in silence for a while, watching the moons drift across the sky. Two very different creatures from two very different worlds, brought together by three children who could not hear. I want you to know something, said eventually. Before you came, I had started to believe that my children were lost to me, that I would never truly know them and they would never truly know me. You changed that. You gave us a bridge when I thought there was only a canyon. She looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time she did not see a small, weak human. She saw a person who had done something extraordinary with nothing but time and patience and a heart bigger than his body. Thank you, she said. Thank you for not giving up on them. Thank you for seeing what no one else could see. Did not say anything. He did not need to. Instead, he made a sign with his hands. The same sign he had taught the children weeks ago, the one that had made them so excited. Hands moving in a pattern, palms pressed together. What does that mean? Asked. Smiled. It means family. And in that moment, under the light of twin moons, in a garden on a planet far from Earth, a dragon queen and a human janitor became exactly that. Family. Not by blood, not by species, not by anything that the universe said should matter, but by choice, by kindness, by the simple, powerful truth that connection does not care what you are, only who you choose to be. And that, perhaps, was the most human thing of all.